Good evening, I am the SQL Goth, and tonight we're going to be talking about getting better package performance or faster package runtimes with packages that are using for each loop containers by using a connection manager level setting called RetainSameConnection. When you're using SSIS packages to extract and load data, a connection to the database is going to be opened and then it's going to be closed. When you're using a for each loop container, that connection is going to be opened and closed at every iteration. Depending on how many times you're looping through this process, it can take a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is build just a small simple package that is picking up a bunch of file names and loading each file name into a table. First, I'm going to bring in the for each loop container. And in the for each loop container, the collection I'm going to use is the for each file enumerator. And I want to point to a directory that's going to hold the files that I'm looking for. I've set up a folder on the root of my C drive called pending files. The rest of this I'm going to keep as default. I'm just looking for any file that's in that folder, and I need the fully qualified name. So that's fine for me. Variable mappings, I need to create a variable. And I'm just going to call this str file path. It's going to be a string type variable. And I'm not going to set any value here. I don't need to at the moment. Okay, now down here in the connection managers, I need to create two different connection managers. First, an OLDB connection. And you can see I already have quite a few here. And I am pointing to a database that I have set up just called data for testing. That's fine. I'm just going to take that. And now I need to create a new file connection. I'm going to point to an existing file. And I'm just going to browse to that pending files folder. And then just take the first file that I have there. All right, now all I need to do is grab the execute SQL task and move that into the loop. And for the connection, I'm just going to point to the OLDB connection that I have. And I'm just going to use a SQL statement. So just inserting these file names into the table. Now the table that I'm using, just pull up Management Studio here, you'll see I'm just using a table called status reports. So insert into status reports. And I just need to give the column name. And the values is actually going to be a parameter. So I have a SQL statement that looks something like this. And then, of course, can't forget the parameter mapping. Believe I'm using a varchar. And the new parameter name, of course, set to 0. All right, so as you can see, the table is currently empty. So what I'm going to do is run this package, see what kind of an execution time we get, and then we'll talk about the retain same connection property. So if I execute the package, you can see it's running. So let this run. Shouldn't take very long. All right, perfect. And let's take a look at the progress. So it took 7.360 seconds. So not a whole lot of time, but we're working with a small set of files. Stop the execution. And now we want to do this again with the RetainSameConnection property set to true. Now to find this property, all you have to do is select the connection manager. So right down here, the OLDB connection manager. And then in the properties pane, if I expand this out, select that again. Let me expand this window a little bit. You can see right here, RetainSameConnection. And of course, by default, it's set to false. This isn't something you'll have to use in every scenario. Now, if I set this to true, and then execute that package again, let's see how much better the runtime ends up being. All right, take a look at the progress tab. And you can see the execution time is now down to 4.672 seconds. So a very small time difference here, but again, we're working with a very small set of files. As the amount of files you work with get larger and larger, say up into the thousands, hundreds of thousands, you're going to see a much faster runtime. Because again, basically what's happening is, as that loop ends and then starts again, the connection to that database is being opened. It's inserting the first file name, and then it closes, and it goes back to the beginning, opens that connection, inserts the next file name, and then closes. So when you're doing this thousands or hundreds of thousands of times, of course it's going to take up a lot of extra time. So if we set that property to true to retain the same connection, it's not going to close that connection at the end of every loop. Now, as I mentioned before, this isn't something that you would want to set to true in every scenario. This is something that you would only want to use in a situation in which you're hitting that data source multiple times. If it's a case where you have a data source that you're just hitting once, and then you're moving on, then by all means you want to keep that set to false so it destroys that connection at the end of its usage. Another scenario in which you're going to see that property set to true is if you're using an OLDB command. OLDB commands are horrible for performance because it is doing a row-by-row update. So that's another case in which you would want to set that property to true. This is just one small setting that you can use to get a better package performance in the case of using for-each loop containers. Thanks for watching. If you want some more tips and tricks, you can always check out my blog at thesqlgoth.com.